Yo guys, what's going on? Invin here. Today I'm going to be bringing you guys an update video on some of the stuff from the PTR, and as you guys can see on the screen here, specifically it's a various announcements post, but what I'm going to be going into here is the weapon balance changes section, and I just wanted to go over kind of which the best weapons are going to be going forward in New World, so you guys can get ahead of the curve here, level these up on the main server so that when the PTR stuff does come in, because although some of these stats could change, generally they've backed up why they've made most of the weapon changes with a pretty logical reason, and there's kind of a clear like master plan behind it. So what I would suspect is that this is going to change maybe a little bit in terms of values, but the overall kind of balancing and which weapons are going to come out on top is probably going to stay the same. So I'm going to bring you guys kind of an in-depth look at that so that you can start leveling those up. If you haven't done so already, you can start crafting the better ones, or at least keeping the better drops that you're getting from those weapon types, and maybe starting to switch up those builds a little bit to cater towards what you're going to want to play once these changes do come into fruition. Now obviously we don't have a confirmed date for when this is going to be yet, and obviously it's still on the public test realm, which means we're probably looking at least another week or so, which gives us plenty of time to get prepared for this. So I'm just going to quickly read through this post here, which says, "Greetings adventurers, thank you to everyone that has been testing the PTR and providing feedback either through the forums or in-game. We've already noticed some bugs and feedback we want to address in our upcoming release, and are keeping our eyes open for your continued help. We have heard your ask for weapon balance notes, weapon feedback threads, as well as server mergers, and we are happy to provide them for you. We have posted the weapon balance notes from the PTR here, as well as created focus feedback threads for each weapon. We will also be merging servers on Monday, so if you are interested in helping us test these out, please make sure that you hop on over the weekend. We will only be merging servers in US East and EU Central. Below you'll find the links to each of these things." So as you guys can see, the testing out server mergers, which is a good thing. Again, in the next week or two, we should be seeing those come live on the main servers if we need them. And of course, if it's successful here, we'll have to wait and see kind of how it goes for the guys there. But I'm looking forward to that. It should be interesting to see how well they've successfully done it, because obviously the server transfers on the whole, after the first kind of little few glitches we had, were pretty good. So I'm quite confident the server mergers will be fairly decent as well. But the main thing you guys clicked on today's video for, and the main thing I want to talk about here, is the weapon balance changes. So if we go into this one here, and basically for our November release, we have done large tuning pass over all of our weapons and upgrades. Our goal for this release was to boost up abilities and weapon trees that we felt were being underutilized, and addressing a few individual overperforming abilities. Now bear in mind that this is in the public test realm, so it's not in the official one, as I mentioned at the beginning, so don't think this is in yet, because obviously we're mentioning things like the Void Gauntlet, but do be aware that these changes will be upcoming to live version very soon, so hopefully you guys can get ahead with this. This patch also fixes many bugs and exploits across various areas of the game that the player community helped us identify. They affect many areas of the game, including perks, duels, attribute threshold bonuses, navigation, wars, outpost rush, and consumables. And we think that these fixes will help improve the flow and consistency of combat, while providing a better overall experience to every game mode. As we work to complete additional combat improvements, we will continue to observe player feedback and experiences to further tune and improve usability and balance for future releases. Below is a comprehensive list of things that are currently in the PTR and will be in the November release. This is just the beginning of our adventures in Eternum. So as you guys can see, currently in the PTR, and we'll be in for the November release. So we're on November 13th on the day I'm recording this video. So anytime over the next 2.5-ish weeks, we'll be seeing these changes coming into the game, which means that's when you can expect to see the Void Gauntlet. So for any of you crafters, I'd be getting myself on that PTR, checking what the recipes are, and farming some of those materials to be really ahead of the game there. But essentially what I'm going to look at here is just kind of ignore the Void Gauntlet, honestly, because right now it's brand new. So the changes coming to that, it's just going to be new changes. So you guys, obviously I've brought videos on that previously. If you want to check those out, you can, but I'm going to focus on things that we've already got and kind of the consumables and stuff here, so you guys can be on top of this. So consumables, they fixed the bug that allowed the welfare buff to stack from different tiers and types of food. The most recent instance of the buff will now replace any previous versions. We've had this used against us on my previous server to before I transferred several times. Very annoying, means they're getting a lot of HP back per second and makes the heals stack really well, so that's good that that's been fixed. And they've also fixed the bug that prevented weapon coating items from being consumed properly when used, so just general bug fixes there. Attribute threshold bonuses reduced the damage reduction provided by the 250 constitution from 80% to 60%. So those that are on 250 con, bear that in mind, you're going to be significantly less tanky on that point there. Damage reduction now only by 60% rather than 80%. Fixed a bug that caused the 250 Constitution bonus cooldown to trigger on a blocked hit, which is good because obviously that was a little bit buggy. You don't want that on a blocked hit, you want it on the actual hits. And of course, they fixed a bug that was preventing players from dodge cancelling out of attacks during an ability's recovery window when the 250 strength bonus was active. This was really annoying, and it's why a lot of people, including myself, switched from Warhammer Great Axe, which is kind of that bruiser style war build, into a paladin or something of similar things where you've got a little bit of range there, because having about 180 to 240 strength was the ideal range. If you got past 250, it's not looking good right now. So hopefully, including some of the other changes that we're going to cover just in a second here, the bruiser build is really coming back, so you guys are going to want to get on that. So let's just read over the rest of the stuff they've done here as well. Perks, you can see that they've increased the scaling of leeching perks on rings and weapons from 0.5 to 1.5, and the damage converted to health on hit from 1 to 5% of the damage converted. So that's really good. Essentially means leeching is actually viable now rather than just being kind of a nonchalant throwaway perk. You've then got fixed a bug that allowed chain elemental perks to damage invulnerable characters, which was things like people in Entomb. They were able to then hit them whilst they're in that, which was a bit of a bug, so that's gone. They've also fixed a bug that allowed the chain elemental perks to strike downed or dead targets, which was a little bit weird, kind of provided some damage there rather than to some of the alive targets, which particularly in Wars and Outpost Rush was essentially giving you less damage. And they fixed a bug that allowed the corrupted Bane perk to scale higher than the other Bane perks. Fixed a bug that caused the chain elemental perks to trigger from the initial impact of the Great Axe Gravity Well skill, which obviously is not intended. Fixed a bug that caused the Hearty perk was incorrectly giving a bonus to strike damage. Fixed the efficiency of Freedom, Vigor, Invigorate, debuff reduction perks from 3 to 5% based on gear score, going from 3% to 8%. They've decreased cooldown of the Keen Speed perk, which grants haste on crit, from 10 to 5 seconds, and increased the haste duration from 2 seconds to 3 seconds, which is really, really good. They've increased the effectiveness of poisoning, bloodletting, burning, crippling, enfeebling, and infected effect duration on ring perks from 3 to 7% and 5 to 15%. So really looking in at these kind of ring perks, attributes that are kind of bonus and extra bonus damage given by some of those weapon perks, ability perks, gear perks, whatever, on those rings specifically, which is actually a really good move because a lot of those, again, as I say, were kind of throwaways. So now we're actually looking at something which is pretty good. Equip load, we've increased the healing bonus of the light equip load to 30% from 20% and increased healing bonus from medium equip load to 15% from 10%. Now, this is going to be crucial because in a minute you guys will see that if you're using heavy armor, you're actually going to get a reduction by 20%, which is why I'm kind of skeptical for the Paladin build going forward. Unfortunately, we might not be able to see that as viable, but I'll get onto that when we get down to that part of the video here as well. So looking at the Warhammer then, the goal with several of the Warhammer buffs has been to make the Juggernaut tree stand out a bit more from the Crowd Crusher tree, as well as funnel some of the power of Shockwave's Rend to Armor Breaker's Rend. So what they've done here is Armor Breaker has had an adjusted hitbox to make it easier to hit enemies that have been knocked down or on inclines. Lasting Trauma has increased the rend effectiveness from 15% to 20%. And Opening Act increased bonus damage from 15 to 25%, which is really, really good, essentially making this a lot better and much more in line with the power of Shockwave, which is what they intended to do there. Mighty Gravel has increased damage scaling from 160 to 170% weapon damage, which is really good. Reduced damage from cooldowns from 22 to 20 seconds, and of course, as you guys will know from the passives there, you can reduce this further with those heavy hits, so this can actually be really, really quick. Justice for All increased damage scaling from 200 to 220%. Wrecking Ball, we've seen an increased damage from 120% to 130%. Safety Measures increased 45 buff duration from 4 seconds to 7 seconds there. Clear Out, we've seen Swing Away fixed an issue where this upgrade was less efficient when striking more targets, which should have been the opposite. It should be more efficient when striking more targets. Shockwave, we've seen Sundering Shockwave, which is the item perk I've talked to you guys before about in previous videos. Reduced the maximum rend effectiveness from 20% to 10%. Now, the reason that's pivotal, if we look back up here at the Armor Breaker, we will see here that the rend effectiveness from 15 to 20%, which actually means now the Armor Breaker is generally going to be better for rending targets than Shockwave. So a lot of you guys that have been using Shockwave, you might want to look into Armor Breaker. I know I'm certainly going to be swaying towards that more now, but I will obviously do some testing, bring you guys an update video on that. That's certainly something you should be looking at for all of your Warhammer players. Path of Destiny, the Leeching Path of Destiny, which is another item perk I've spoken to you guys about previously. They've fixed the bug that prevented this perk from working when simulated reduction modifier was equipped. So this should actually work now, get you a lot more HP back, which is really good. And then passive here, we've seen exhaustive attacks increase stamina regeneration penalty applied by the exhaustive debuff from 15 to 20%. So really, really good there on that one as well. Now, life staff, this is going to be a big update. A lot of you guys will have been kind of thinking about this one. A lot of healers, a lot of paladins. This is a huge thing. So the life staff adjustments are to funnel a bit of the healing power into the light and medium equip loads while reducing some of its power for the tank healing builds, as well as make it easier and less confusing to properly target and heal the correct group members, which is always a good thing, of course. So what they've done here is reduced base healing by 20% to account for the increased healing in the equip loads. Targeted adjustments, normalized all target healing spells and target lock on to have a maximum range of 25 meters. Added out of range targeting healing functionality. Group UI will change color when the target is out of range. If the target moves out of range, spell will cancel or not cast on self. Trying to cast a targeted heal on a target that is out of range will display a target is out of range notification. Fixed an issue where targeted heals activated by using the ability key would not perform a direct heal on the target. So basically they've made it a lot easier to do those group heals or those healing to group members in those war and outpost rush situations where the maps are a lot bigger, which is really nice. Sacred Ground here, you've got fixed an issue where the life staff Sacred Ground visual effects and tooltip stated it lasted longer than the actual duration, so it's more accurate. Fixed an issue that allowed the healing from Sacred Ground to be stacked from multiple sources if they were using different ability upgrades. So despite the fact that they said AoE stacking was not a thing, if you had different upgrades, then it could be a thing. So they've now fixed that. Reduced the Fortify effectiveness of Sacred Ground item perk from 3 to 15% to 3 to 10% now, and reduced Holy Ground stamina and mana regen from 100 to 50%. So not quite as good for the stamina and mana regens, but still worthwhile being in there for. Splash of Light, they've increased the efficiency of the life staff's Splash of Light ability from 40 to 60%, which is really good, gives it a lot more viability. And of course they've increased the efficiency of Splash of Light's shared recovery upgrade from 3 to 5% as well, which gives this basically a lot more viability, and I think we'll see a little bit more play with this now, which is really good. Overprotection, they fixed an issue where shared protection's effect was being refreshed by the healing applied by Protector's Blessing. Mending Protection, which is an item perk for Orb of Protection, this perk's functionality has been changed. Instead of triggering if the target does not have any active buffs, it now triggers if the target is healed by Orb of Protection is under 50% health, which I think is a lot better, and again will make this much more worth having on. Then they've changed Light's Embrace to have an increase the efficiency of Light's Embrace connection upgrade from 1 to 2%. Neither here nor there with that, but you know, would make it a little bit more viable. People are using it anyway, so to have that upgraded was always a bonus. So with the Blessed Item perk, they've reduced the healing bonus effectiveness from a 10 to 30% chance to a 5 to 20% chance, which does mean that now it's not going to be essential to have this on, so to speak, particularly if you're down that lower end. But it is still going to be really good, because plus 20%, particularly if you're in that heavy armor then that's not going to be getting the buffs. If you've got plus 20% as a blessed perk on one of your items, you're going to be doing the same amount as a medium equip load, so probably it's going to be something which is pretty good. So again, it's going to be something there, but that's kind of the changes you've seen to the life staff. Paladin builds are probably going to be hit hardest by that, but it is as it is, you know, we just have to move forward with that. Hatchet then, goal of the Hatchet fixes were to fix a few of the issues that were resulting in missed hits, and to buff the throwing axe tree to make it more useful, and buff the infected throw tree to make it more viable as an anti-healing ability. So that's really important. As well as this, improve the buffering for heavy attacks and make them more consistent to use. So essentially they've gone on here to fix an issue with aim throw that could be used to cancel basic attacks at any time, fixed an issue where the Hatchet heavy attacks was not buffering at a consistent time, resulting in attack transitions not functioning properly, fixed an issue where when using a Hatchet, if the player honed on a target, the player would be moved to a spot far enough away from the target that the hits could miss due to hitbox sizes being a bit smaller than the distance the player would be targeted from. So good. Generally fixed up the messy edges that the Hatchet had, kind of drawn in that, you know, the rapid fire Hatchet with that aimed throw where you were just kind of flinging it up. been fixed. So generally we should see a lot more kind of fair play from the Hatchet here. They've put Berserk, they've fixed an issue where activating Berserk would consume the Relentless Fury and accumulated power buffs. Feral Rush has had fixed an issue where the Feral Rush was able to be triggered without a cooldown in settlements. Raging Torrent fixed an issue where some of the attacks would miss due to being placed too far away from the target hit. Infected Throw, this is a big one. They've increased disease and weakness duration from 5 to 10 seconds, so they've doubled the effectiveness of this one. They've put the Mortal Power upgrade, which has increased bonus duration on low health targets from 8 to 15, which is almost double. And then the Aerial Transmission increased the duration that the AoE cloud lingers in place from 3 to 6 seconds, again doubling that. So essentially doubling the effectiveness of Infected Throw, which is really, really big. And as they said at the start there, in terms of an anti-healing kind of class or usability for the Hatchet, that is going to be huge. So I think we're going to see those a lot more in Wars now, a lot more in Outpost Rush, and in PvP, that's going to be absolutely huge. They've also changed the Rending Throw, so they've reduced the cooldown from 15 to 8 seconds, so almost halving that one. And then they've also looked at the passive here, which is where they fixed an issue where Hatchet Defy Death ultimate cooldown timer was being removed when a player died. So essentially they could use it every life, which was not intended. Great Axe here, then we've seen some big changes to the Great Axe. We've seen fix several issues that were affecting various abilities, as well as fixing a few issues that were making Gravity Well slightly more powerful than intended. Reap, they have fixed an issue where the Great Axe Reap incorrectly triggered a breakout dodge. Gravity Well is fixed an issue where slow effect from Gravity Well was not always being removed if the player was able to get out of the effect area, resulting in the effect lasting up to 2 seconds longer than intended. Fixed an issue where the Gravity Well tooltip wasn't listing the melee damage that the ability would trigger if the ability is triggered next to a target. Whirlwind, they've added Grit by default, which is really, really important. Fortifying Whirlwind, which is an item perk, they've fixed an issue where this perk could be applied to too many stacks of Fortify, resulting in it going outside of the Fortify cap. Essentially, now you'll just be up to Fortify cap there when you do activate this, not going over it. Passives, they've looked at Heavy Pull, fixed an issue where Heavy Pull attacks would have incorrect hitboxes when this passive was equipped. Really good, thank goodness for that. That's been something a long time coming. And they've also updated the Gravity passive to no longer increase the duration of any pulls. Ability was not functioning as intended. Updated ability to now apply a root for 0.25 seconds to targets affected by a pull. So essentially they can't just dodge out of the way. They will be stuck there for a little bit, which again is going to make the Great Axe very, very good. They've also changed some stuff about the bow here. They've added some additional clarity to some of the abilities and reduced the cooldown / power of some of the abilities to make them a bit more viable. So, updated descriptions for Rain of Arrow, Poison Shot, Splinter Shot to indicate that they cannot headshot. They have fixed an issue where several bow abilities are not benefiting from the increased damage from higher tier arrows, which now they should. Fixed an issue that allowed consecutive primary attacks to fire faster than intended. Evade Shot, so they've got Go the Distance. This upgrade now applies haste at the end of the skill's casting time rather than at the start, so that the buff's duration is not partially lost during the skill animation. Poison Shot has had a reduced cooldown from 35 to 30 seconds, which is quite big because Poison Shot is very, very good. And they've also fixed an issue that can cause Poison Shot from go on cooldown without the ability actually being fired, which again is essential when you're going to be using it in those war PvP environments. Rapid Shot has had a reduced cooldown from 20 to 14 seconds, so a third of its cooldown almost taken off there, which is really, really good. They've also had Rapid Accuracy, fixed an issue where this upgrade would not reduce the cooldown if the last arrow of Rapid Shot killed the enemy. They've also got Rain of Arrows here. Rain of Arrows is no longer hits enemies through doors, which is good. And passives here, they have fixed the issue where hip fire in the bow was triggering a heightened precision passive from the Musket's ability tree. Slightly odd, but that's been fixed up now as well. Next here, then, we're looking at the sword. The main goal of the changes to the sword / shield was to make the leaping strike ability feel a bit better, as well as improve the buffering for heavy attacks to make them more consistent to use. So they fixed an issue where basic attack buffers and cancels weren't working properly due to the sword heavy attack. Fixed an issue where the fully charged sword heavy attack had different timings than the regular heavy attack. Shield rush, they've improved rush, increased the weaken duration from 4 to 10 seconds, which makes this really, really good. And they've also made massive changes to Leaping Strike, which reduces the cooldown from 25 to 18 seconds, which again is about a third duration decrease. They have increased the damage scaling from 135 to 150% of weapon damage, sped up the recovery after using Leading Strike to make it easier to transition into other attacks, and they've also looked at the Cowardly Punishment, updated the description to include the slow percentage value. So, Sword and Shield guys, you guys have seen a big, decent buff, particularly if you're going to be using Shield Rush or Leaping Strike there. Overall, very, very decent. Looking at the fire staff then, this one is a big hefty area where they've looked at quite a lot of things here, so any mages pay attention. Essentially, focus the changes on the fire staff to reduce some of the effectiveness of the standard attacks due to how powerful they were in comparison to some of the abilities. Pillar of Fire has increased damage scaling from 134 to 170%, which is huge. Fixed an issue where Pillar of Fire targets the self when activated from the ability button. Fixed an issue where Pillar of Fire failed to trigger Runes of Helios when activated using the ability key. Fixed an issue which caused the Pillar of Fire to hit twice against targets near the edge of the effect radius. So for any of you guys that were doing that, it's actually a bug. It's not intended, so you will now only be able to hit targets once. They've also looked at Meteor Shower, where they fixed an issue where Runes of Helios triggered on targeting Meteor Shower rather than casting it, which is good. And of course, Fireball has been looked at here, where they've added some additional clarity to the Fireball ability. Is not able to crit. Previously, it would show the crit damage color, but not the actual damage dealt increased. It will no longer show orange damage numbers, and an additional tooltip was added for this. Flamethrower has been looked at, which has increased damage scaling from 34 to 50%, which could be very, very good, particularly in the PvE situations. And then we've got huge changes to the passives here. So Clear Casting has been reduced damage bonus from 10 to 5%. Clear Mind has had a reduced Empower effectiveness from 10 to 5%. Runes of Helios has reduced the damage bonus from 30 to 25%. Prophet of a Fire God reduced the crit damage bonus from 20 to 15%. Spellslinger reduced the crit damage chance bonus from 15 to 10%, and also fixed an issue where crit chance was also increased for the standard attacks and not just abilities, so now it will only be for abilities. Pyromania reduced the ability damage bonus from 20 to 15%. Kindle fixed an issue where this passive was increasing buff duration by the incorrect amount. And of course, Reheat here reduced the time required without triggering ability from Reheat from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. They've also updated Singe and Watch It Burn passives to mix up the functionality. Singe went from inflicting burn to critical hits to using Watch It Burn functionality of triggering burn on light attacks. And Watch It Burn now inflicts burn on critical hits from abilities only. So big changes there, particularly in the passives. I know a lot of people sometimes are only even taking 2 of the abilities because the points into the passives were much, much more worth it. Now we're going to see a bigger emphasis on the abilities from the fire staff, and to be honest, going forward, I can only imagine this is going to be more so the case. Obviously, they want the abilities to be the most focal point of the weapon, so bear that in mind. You are going to probably want to top up to a 3rd ability now, maybe reduce one of those passives. Have a look at those different changes there and see what you guys think. But for me, they're still going to be very, very good. It's still going to be one of the best weapons in the game. It's just seeing its viability of being the overall champion brought down just a tad amount there. Then looking at the spear, the goal was to buff some of the lesser used abilities as well as improve the modifier of the Coupe de Grace. Upgrade to sweep. Its previous setup made it questionable whether it would be worthwhile to take or not. So they've adjusted the distance the player would move forward towards the target when doing a heavy attack. The heavy attack was pulling the user too close, resulting in the Deadly Reach passive not being able to trigger consistently. Sweep has had a change to Coupe de Grace that increased the damage scaling from 125 to 150%, and also this attack is now flagged as heavy, allowing it to be trigger heavy related passives, which is really, really good with the spear. Skewer, you've seen an increased bleed damage from 10 to 20%. Perforate, we've seen increased damage in scaling from 70 to 80%, and also fixed a bug that caused passive continuous motion to not reduce the cooldown of Perforate. Cyclone has had increased damage scaling from 110 to 130%, and Vault Kick has fixed an issue where Vault Kick's cooldown began 1 frame before the hitbox would appear. This resulted in the ability not going on cooldown if the attack was interrupted early or if it did not hit. So it's really, really good, making the spear really come out on top, particularly for those 1v1 and small scale type environments, but also seeing a little bit more viability in those large scale zones now, which is really, really nice. Ice Gauntlet here then, we're going to be looking at the goal of the Ice Gauntlet was to reduce the effectiveness of some of the maxed out combinations of the abilities while still maintaining their usefulness. So heavy attack, increased heavy attack startup and recovery time to make it more consistent with the other magic weapons attacks and timings, particularly with the Void Gauntlet. When we've seen this come into play, this was hugely affected compared to the Ice Gauntlet in the obviously standard build. So when we were using the Ice Gauntlet in the PTR, we were like, oh, hold up, this is as slow as the Void Gauntlet now. So they've made those more in line, which is really good. They've fixed an issue where the Ice Gauntlet movement while attacking was faster than the other magic weapons. Fixed an issue where basic attacks on the Ice Gauntlet can sometimes shoot through a player or AI without dealing damage if the attacker is too close. Fixed an issue that allowed enemies with heavy freeze passive to root players standing in their own Ice Storm. Ice Storm has had a few changes here. It's increased the time between damage ticks from 0.25 seconds to 0.33 seconds, so you're only going to get 3 a second ticks rather than 4. Fixed an issue where the Ice Storm did no damage if the player had the Unending Thaw item perk. Fixed an issue that the Ice Storm did not do damage to enemies immune to slow. Fixed an issue where Ice Storm stopped if the caster swapped their weapons to another active weapon. And fixed an issue that was causing Ice Storm to not damage larger boss enemies. Ice Spike then has also had a fix, which has fixed an issue where the Ice Spike displays a cast timer despite there being an instant cast. Wind Chill has been increased damage scaling per tick from 16 to 20%. Ice Shower has had an increased cooldown from 20 to 30 seconds. Entombed players can no longer be healed. Reduce the health of the Entombed by 50% of players' max health. Reduce the damage of Breakout Burst attacks from 160 to 70%. Fixed an issue where invulnerability on Entombed could be removed when the tomb was still active. And fixed an issue that allowed players to move while Entombed after dying. Ice Pylon, they've had some big changes here as well. They've increased the Pylon health by 20%, added a max lifetime of 45 seconds to the Ice Pylon, fixed an issue where the Ice Pylon could consume mana but would not activate on slopes, terrain, or off a ledge. Fixed an issue that allowed players to place multiple Ice Pylons by dying and being revived, and fixed an issue where the Ice Pylons targeting neutral players / enemy AI during a 1v1 duel, which is really, really good overall. Kind of cleared that up and made it a lot more effective with better health, and of course you'll see less issues with it being a max lifespan now as well. We've also seen changes to the passives here, which is Ultimate Chill. They've reduced Ultimate Chill's bonus damage from 35 to 25%, fixed an issue where Ultimate Chill's ability did not apply to enemies in some cases, and updated the tooltip wording for clarification on the functionality. Critical Frost has had a reduced critical change bonus from 20 to 15%. Energized Critical reduced critical damage bonus from 15 to 10%. Heavy Freeze added a 5-second cooldown to freeze effect, and fixed an issue where the Iced Refreshed perk could activate on both downing and killing a player. Now it only triggers on a down. Next then, the Rapier. This is going to be one of the better items when we do see these changes. So the goals of the Rapier changes were to fix some of the issues that were being encountered, as well as make it easier to work around the bleed effect, and in the bleed tree reducing the cooldown of Thunder and making riposts pay off a bit better due to the risk required to trigger it. So they've fixed an issue where Thunder, Flourish and Fletch had their cooldown begin 1 frame before the hitbox would appear. This resulted in the abilities going on cooldown if the ability, or the attack rather, was interrupted early even if it did not hit. Flurry has fixed an issue where subsequent attacks would frequently miss or be hard to hit when using the Flurry by improving the homing on the attack. Overwhelm has fixed an issue where this upgrade was incorrectly applying stamina damage instead of just block damage. Thunder has reduced cooldown from 11 to 6 seconds, almost half, and again fixed an issue that caused the upgrade to only function on blocking targets, which is really, really good. Riposte, we've had a cooldown reduction from 20 to 12 seconds, so again by almost a third there. Base stun duration increased from 1.5 to 2 seconds, and lasting consequences stun duration increased from 2 to 2.5 seconds. And the passive series see momentum increased bonus damage from 25 to 30%, and swiftness has fixed an issue where the passive was granting haste from bleed damage ticks instead of its actual weapon hits. So big changes there. You could see the Rapier coming right up in the battlefield there. A lot more players using this because especially with those stuns and more fluidity of the weapon and a lot shorter cooldowns, it's looking pretty good. Musket finally here then. We've got the goal with Musket build was to make it feel a little bit better to use across all levels and increase the use and effectiveness of several abilities. Increase the Musket base damage by 2.5%. Fixed an issue where the Musket could not be reloaded after dodge rolling when triggering the auto run. Fixed an issue where the reloading would not automatically resume after interruption while player is aiming. Fixed an issue where Musket's overcharged shots were being consumed while hip firing while crouching. Fixed an issue that caused critical reload passive to function inconsistently. Traps no longer can be triggered by players in Death's Door. Increase sticky bomb damage from 175 to 235%. Reduce the cooldown of stopping power from 18 seconds to 15 seconds. Reduce the cooldown of power shot from 15 to 12 seconds. Shooter's stance has had a reduced cooldown from 20 to 18 seconds and added additional options to exit shooter's stance pose and ensured that the player will be returned to standing when exiting the stance. Players can exit shooter's stance by sprint, the ability key, dodge, escape, and releasing right mouse button. Now, there is a ton of other stuff to cover here, but that is obviously all of the weapon changes. It's a very, very long video, but hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. You've kind of seen what weapon changes are going to be, and you can kind of accumulate what's going to be the best combos, what's going to be the best weapons. I think the Bruiser builds are really going to come in. The Ice Gauntlet's going to be taking a few hits, but the Fire Staff's going to be getting some improvements to the abilities. Rapier's looking like it's going to be very good. And of course, here you can see at the end, the bow, and of course what we've just looked at, the musket, are both looking very, very tasty there as well. So there could be some really good options coming forward into PvP and PvE in the future. So hopefully you guys can get on top of that and prepare for that. If you have enjoyed today's video, please do leave me a like on the video down below, as it really does help support me and my content. If you're new to the channel, you want to see more New World news, updates, announcements, builds, any sort of content surrounding New World, then make sure you do drop a subscribe down below, as it'd be really, really much appreciated. I do upload every single day, so having you here as part of my channel community would be absolutely amazing. Other than that, guys, as always, thank you for watching. Take care and peace.